Hi, it's Karen, the weekend craftaholic, and today is all about scrunchies. I'm going to show you a quick, super easy way to make scrunchies using scraps of fabric.
Don't go out and buy elastic, these simple hair ties do the job just great.
So let's get straight into it. So let's talk about fabric.
I think cotton is the way to go. Most of us have it in our stash and it's quite cheap and affordable to buy too.
With your little ties, your elastic, if you've got a fabric that's quite see-through, you maybe want to go for a coordinating tie that's going to be hidden beneath. For example, you wouldn't want a black elastic with a white fabric like this because you'll see that through that. So just pick a nice neutral colour that will be hidden once the scrunchie is put together. Any fabric scraps will do, depends on your own skill level and how comfortable you are with your fabrics. This is quite a silky one, it's quite slippery, but the end result's pretty good. So do what you feel comfortable with and you can always evolve later. I'll put all of the measurements down below for you, but there's 3 different ways you can approach this. If you just want a general size scrunchie like this is, not too tight, not too wide, then I would go with a 30-inch by 4-inch tall scrap piece of fabric. This gives you a good balance of the length as well as the height of the fabric in the finished scrunchie. If you wanted to go for a more tighter scrunchie, then just reduce the length. So this one, for example, is 18 inches across, but still 4 inches tall because I still want that kind of volume and thickness of the scrunchie. But if you wanted a thicker scrunchie, like this one, a lot bigger, then just do it a little bit higher. This one I've got here, still need to press them, but this one I've got here is 5 inches tall and 12 inches across. The moral of the story is you don't need to worry too much about the sizes, just experiment and play with it. The more fabric you have, the more it will gather. Bear that in mind if you want it a nice tight one or not. But rule of thumb, as a general one, I would go for a 30-inch by 4-inch scrap piece of fabric. And then we'll head to the sewing machine. So before we begin, we want to make sure our machine setting is on the smallest stitch. This makes sure that it's nice and tight because there is going to be a lot of pressure on the fabric as the scrunchie is put on and off. And then we're going to take the fabric that we've cut and a little elastic tie as well. Now we're going to be sewing this inside out. So what we want to do is have the right sides of the fabrics together, the wrong side showing outwards. And get your elastic and if you can see, just tuck them both together so it's overlapping and keeping that elastic on the inside. And we're going to stitch down this side and we're going to keep moving this elastic down out of the way while we sew. So right sides together, wrong sides out, and fold it over and just put the elastic on the inside. And then if you pinch that side, that's the side we're going to stitch.
Now this bit can be a little bit fiddler, but that's okay. Once you've done it once or twice, you'll soon get used to it. Just remember to always do a back stitch at the start and the end of your stitching, and that's going to reinforce that stitching so it doesn't come undone when it's being pulled on. Now you can see here as I'm stitching, I'm just doing a couple of inches at a time, and then I'm going to stop and just readjust that elastic tie so I don't accidentally sew over it and just moves it out of the way. And as you progress with this, you'll start to see little gathers start to form, or little ruffles, whatever you want to call them, as the elastic gets further and further down with the fabric. So it comes together pretty quick. I have used a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. It really doesn't matter what seam allowance you use whatever you're comfortable with. Don't try to get too close to the edge unless it's a really small piece of scrap fabric. The other thing you could do, of course, if you've got an overlocker, is use an overlocker for this part as well, because that really will help to give it that finish and make sure none of it does come undone. And while you see me do this last bit of sewing, I'll just also mention the thread. Obviously use a nice strong cotton thread, nothing too old that could fray because it is going to be under pressure quite a bit. And in terms of colour, again, it's personal choice. You might want to use a complementary colour or a contrasting colour. So whether you want it to be blended into the fabric, I'm just using a white here, or whether you want to use something a little bit more brighter, that's really going to stand out in the scrunchie. It really is up to you. Just be mindful that we're sewing this inside and out, so it's the thread that's in your spool that would potentially be seen if you did want it to stand out. Now we're coming to the end of this sewing now, so again I'm just doing another back stitch just to reinforce that, and I did have this on fast forward speed twice, so you can see it came together pretty quickly. trimming off those edges, and now I'm going to show you just how we turn it inside and out. Now you see my hands have changed. This is actually my daughter. She's got much better nails than me, but whatever you want to use to turn it inside and out is really up to you. You can use a knitting needle, a pair of scissors, you could use a little gadget if you're a sewer and you've got these to hand, but whatever you do, just be careful you don't push it too hard because you could accidentally rip that fabric as you do that. And there it is, it's almost out. Just a little bit of brute force, and you can see just how nicely those ruffles come across on this particular size. This was the longer size that I did. Now we're going to tuck the ends in, so I'm not going to worry about stitching the ends. I'm going to tuck them both inside each other, and then once that's done, I'm going to put one inside the other, as you can see here as well. And then you've got a couple of options at this point. You can either hand stitch it if you prefer that, and you can see just down the seam here is where you do it, or you can do what I've done, and I'm just about to show you now. I'm just going to stitch that close back onto the sewing machine. Now I did stitch this flat. Again, if you want a more ruffled effect, you could also create ruffles at the side as you sew, but just be mindful of the thickness as well. Depending on the fabric you're using, it could be quite thick to sew through. And that is the scrunchie done. I hope you have fun. It's a great little project to do, using up your scraps and also giving us little gifts as well. Thank you for watching.